Welcome to Houston Sports Talk with your host, Robert Land.
Thanks for checking into the best Houston sports podcast. Robert along with Sports Radio 610 Shaun Bijani, and joining us is an old friend and Texans contributor for the Houston Chronicle, Stephanie Stradley. And I can't believe, Steph, it's been 17 years with Chron.com. Is that right?
Oh, geez. I haven't done the math, but that sounds about right. I can't believe it. But, you know.
And you're still only 25 too, that's the hard thing.
That's right. That's right. You know, the Texans are old enough to drink now.
That's awesome.
Steph, you've got a lot of insight to the Texans fan base. What are you hearing? What kind of feedback are you getting about how that lost section of the fan base is feeling with this offseason?
I can't speak for all of the fan base, but I can tell you I was at the draft party. I've been to pretty much all of the draft parties since at least the Mario Williams draft. So I have seen some things. This was amazing. I mean, I had a sense that they would take quarterback in the first round, but nobody really knew for sure what they were going to do. And that's fine. Like, that's what you really want. Early on with the process, Demiko Ryan had kind of let the cat out of the bag and said, well, there's two quarterbacks, and kind of the implication when he was first hired is, hey, one of those quarterbacks is going to be the Texans. You know, there was all the noise about trading up to the first pick and that they really wanted Bryce Young. But there was a lot of different noise out there, and some of it was inconsistent. And my full approach up to that point was just, hey, you know, don't worry about ghosts. You know, what's going to happen is going to happen. It was amazing being at the draft party because, you know, when they announced the pick, you know, CJ Stroud, then, you know, there was much rejoicing because, you know, that's the most important, you know, position on the field, and you're taking a shot at it. And you don't know how it's going to turn out, but, you know, a key part of what the Texans are going to try to do this year is you need a quarterback that's accurate. And, you know, that is part of, you know, CJ Stroud's game. There was that component of it. And then so like everybody's rejoicing, people are moving around. And then I think I almost blacked out during the next part because all of a sudden people start screaming. And I'm like, what is going on here? And I look up at the big screen and Texans are on the clock. And it was pretty amazing. It was amazing. I mean, I think it's hilarious. Like, just looking at the fan base, it's hilarious that over the years, you hear the same debates over again. You know, you need to have a quarterback, and you need a pass rush, and defensive linemen are premium positions. And the early debate is, hey, you know, you took David Carr and you passed up on Julius Peppers, and now we're just like, we take both. I mean, it's an amazing approach because we've heard this debate over time, and like, you know, if you think in this particular draft, there's a lot of maybe solid starters in the draft, but out of the elite players, any number of people had said there's like 6 to, let's say, 12, right? If your analysis is, hey, these are the two players you want at premium positions that are hard to get, and you're starting the development clock this year, because, you know, frankly, they should have started the development clock on players like years ago, but like, you know, this is where things are. So this is amazing. They got some people might say the two best players in the draft, depending on how you're analyzing things. And, you know, they've started the development clock, and they definitely have a direction. If you just look at the draft top to bottom, including looking at undrafted free agents, like, there is definitely a theme to this particular draft.
You think the fans are happy with the other things that are going on as far as the stuff that's kind of angled towards them? Because, you know, they lost so many people, and I don't think it was as simple as, okay, we got Demiko Ryans and maybe we look like we're a little bit more in a positive direction. Was there anything else that you thought that they needed to work on? And what is the feeling with that?
Well, I mean, I think just generally speaking, Houstonians and Texans in general have very high standards for their football. Like, you know, the Cowboys and the Texans haven't been good enough, long enough. And so there has been very high standards for what the fans expect from the Texans, because they kind of went the extra mile when they had to create a whole franchise from scratch. And there has been turnover, but like, I know, in talking to everyone that their intentions are to fix things with fans. And it's just a question of like, at what point do people feel okay coming on board? Like, there are people out there that are completely on board, but like for other people, it's going to just take some time where they feel like they're a part of it and they feel welcome to be a part of it. And I think a big part of that is, I have my t-shirt on. It's a DAmico t-shirt, DMC. It's kind of a play on the DeLorean, kind of Back to the Future. I mean, if you look at the kind of person that Demiko Ryan is, and like his first year as a rookie was my first year writing at the Chronicle, everything that he's about is what Texas football is about. It's about being real, treating people like adults, trying to put players really much in the best position to win. That leadership is about getting people to follow you, not because you're the boss, but because what you're saying makes sense to them and is going to be good for everybody as a team. And that it's not about an individual, it's about the team as a whole. Like, he's a real person. He's an authentic person. He's been in a position for many years where he knows how to talk to people in football terms. In recent years, and this is not a blame, this is just an observation, there have been people put in situations where they're talking directly to the fan base who haven't had that experience before. And it's a skill. It's a skill to talk to people from all different backgrounds, and some are with you and some are against you. And Demiko's way of talking is just football talk. Football talk is like, it's about performance. And so far, he's taking the lead on things. And really, that's what you've needed. You needed a football person putting a message out that's worth following. And, this draft is that kind of draft. This is a performance draft. This isn't, this is basically, hey, we have to earn it. And, they're trying to put those pieces in place. But like, as it relates to individual fans, that's an individual thing. Like, there have been entry points and exit points to this franchise for many years. And not just the last couple of years, but longer than that has been difficult. Like, they were winning under O'Brien, but the feeling wasn't completely aligned at that time, where people were like, okay, yeah, you're winning, but not winning the way that, like, let's say Mahomes, like you see what Mahomes is doing with Andy Reid, and you're like, why aren't we being more like this? Why does this look so difficult? Why are you making it harder on yourself, not having a general manager? Like, so there's been a lot of things that they've had to fix over time. There's people that have entered and exited the organization. There's people that have entered and exited the fan base. And really, at the end of the day, everybody wants the same thing. And it's nice to hear the way that Demiko Ryan talks to everyone. But it's going to take some time with some people. And that makes sense, because it's been a difficult number of years. You've seen it.
I love the way you break things down, Steph. Only you can do it. I mean, you do it in such a way where people can understand. And, when I'm listening to you talk about Demiko and how he talks to people, his players, the fans, media, we know how important it is, sometimes for new blood to come into an organization and have that person be a former player, what kind of juice that brings. It just seemed like with these hiring candidates this offseason, the Sean Paytons of the world and, all of these guys, there were some good coaches out there. There's no doubt about that.
And they were talking to them this time around. They were talking to a lot of really great candidates. Like, that's exciting. And they ended up getting one that I think is going to be just a tremendous fit.
The point that I was going to make, though, you're right, is they were legitimately looking for a guy to help them turn the worm, turn the page on this rebuild. But with Demiko, he brings this element that seems to come almost so natural to him, in my opinion, that, a football locker room is kind of a melting pot. There's all kinds of people from all over the country, with different upbringings. They're used to certain systems, certain ways to communicate with others and to be communicated with. And he just has a way about him to just pull the very best, it seems, out of anyone around him. We saw it as a player covering him for, years past when he was with the Texans. And I think that's what he's going to bring as a coach. I mean, we don't know anything about him, to be honest with you, as a coach, in terms of, what kind of mind he is defensively. We know he can rally the troops and get a defense together. Can he get a team together?
And he's been able to get the best performance of different types of players on defense.
Yeah.
And what's great about it is, I know some people want to go, former Texan, da-da-da. But I mean, he has performed at a high level in everything that he's done to date. He performed at a high level as a player, both here and with the Eagles, and saw what they did up close. And then he earned it with the 49ers. And he earned the respect of the people that he coached. I mean, the people that have worked with him are his biggest fans. Now, of course, he has to show it, but I mean, he has just a great football mind, and he has just a good way of communicating to people. And really, football is a communication business, because you're trying to get people to do things that are violent and health risking, as a group, as a team. Like that's a hard thing to do. It's a hard thing to do. It's like, okay, we're going to do this thing that brings this many people together, because it's not just like, oh, well, we're going to have a figurehead for, baseball or basketball. Like, I mean, of course, those people have to, be good at their jobs, but it's not as many people. There's so many parts to a football team. And that's what I'm very excited about is I think that Nick Caserio's skills work very well with Demiko Ryan's skills, that the things that each of them are strong at help the other person. And I know that there has been kind of this dialogue that, Nick shows relief that he has more help. And I think that's real. I think that's real. Now, of course, they're coming at things from kind of different orientations, but a lot of it's the same orientation, which is just football talk. Like, there are certain things that everybody has as an expectation for football. And maybe some things are emphasized more by different types of teams, but there are some just basic things, like talk to people like adults, give them reasons why they should be doing the things that they're doing, and trying to get people to work together as a team, and trying to put together a roster that makes sense, where you have a good combination of experienced players and young players coming together for a common goal. Like, I'm excited. I don't know how this is going to turn out, but this is a storyline that I like. If this was a TV show, this is a TV show I want to watch.
Yeah.
Speaking of people that were anxious to see what he can do, CJ Stroud and Steph, I don't know if you heard this story, but CJ Stroud apparently pushed the Texans to draft Tank Dell right after he was drafted. Tank said they'd messaged right after Stroud was drafted, and then CJ said he let them know he wanted Dell, and messages sent before Tank was drafted. Stroud was impressed with Dell at the combine. Did you like that from CJ Stroud, taking some leadership, and the Texans maybe looking to him for that information and really taking it seriously? Or is that all a concern that CJ Stroud has that much say as the quarterback, all of like five minutes into the process?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a sweet story. I don't know how, like, I do know that when teams draft players, like, they get whatever information that they can get from whatever sources. Like, they will talk to people inside the building, and of course they may have talked to him about it. I mean, I'm guessing that he was already on their radar to some degree anyway. What I am impressed with this entire group is, like, I know that some people are like, well, you could have drafted more players if you didn't, trade up, or, this guy was rated higher than this guy. But I don't think that this year in particular, there was a consensus for, let's say, for wide receivers. Like, if you talked to 20 people who focus on the draft exclusively, they would give you 20 different versions of who are the best people in this particular draft. Now, I can tell you, if you just look through the list of players, of course, there's been a lot made that they were captains. So, you're wanting some level of responsibility, but you don't get to be a captain if you're not performing. Like you have to perform if that is going to be part of your background. And like the wide receivers that they drafted, they didn't just, test well, they performed well in college. Like all of the guys that they drafted have some level of performance. They're not like workout warriors or, okay, this guy ran this. And, some fans may not like that, they're not looking at like height, weight as much as maybe some other teams are, but like these guys performed. They performed, and they're going to expect the young players to perform. And it applies also to the undrafted free agents. Like there's some key undrafted free agents. They performed. Like maybe they weren't drafted as high because maybe some of the measurables weren't there, or they might be considered developmental prospects. But you can see why they're brought onto the team. And I think my understanding of it is the way that they're drafting is they see these individuals as people that if they get, injury luck, of course, and development, that they have very high ceilings of what they could do as an NFL player.
Big question for me, Steph. And you kind of started to get into it in terms of what the Texans roster constructions looked like outside of the draft. Free agency, I really liked what they did. They brought in a lot of leaders, namely Denzel Perryman in the linebacker core, Jimmy Ward in the secondary. They've got a really solidified now offensive line, maybe for the first time in recent memory. Robert Woods in the receiver core. What did you think of the way Nick Caserio and Demiko Ryan's really constructed this roster this offseason, and now mixing in these young performing leaders that they drafted now? 7 of the 9 players, as you mentioned, were team captains, and they were high performers. You talk about Hutchinson and Dell being 2 of the most productive wide receivers in all of college football this past season. What did you think of it? Does it vibe with you? And what do you think it kind of lends itself to? I mean, coming from a team that kind of stumbled into 4 wins this past year, what's the end game for you in the 2023 season?
Well, I mean, I think part of it is, you think back to the Kubiak-Shanahan type of teams. Like, first of all, you start at the quarterback. You need an accurate guy slinging the ball. That's probably the key skill. Can you throw the ball accurately? Which, and you may remember that a lot of the quarterbacks who ran this system said, yeah, there's always a place to go with the ball, right? Mm-hmm. For your wide receivers, you need them to be able to catch the ball. Like, it doesn't matter if you run really fast. If you can't catch the ball, like high possession is like the absolute essential to this offense. And I have to say, in recent years, I mean, all throughout the O'Brien era, I was like, they don't catch the ball. They don't run precise routes. And like everything is very detail oriented with this offense. Back in the day, my question was always, well, if this offense is so productive, why aren't more teams running it? And I think, well, now more teams are running variations of it. But I think part of it is you have to make sure that the offensive line coaching is just spot on. Like, the details are important, because the way that the offense is supposed to work is recognizing that defensive linemen are usually more athletic than the offensive linemen. So the entire offense is supposed to look the same, whether you're running the ball, you're passing the ball. The short pass is supposed to be considered kind of a run. So you can't have any drop passes. You have to have precision with that. So everything goes together, where you might, like, Andre Johnson for this offense was an extra, but sometimes you could see that like there was a variety of different targets, and depending on which defense that you're playing. And we might actually see tight ends again being productive. Like, this is exciting to see with what they're doing on offense. And then on the defensive side of the ball, they had a lot of good players, but, you can't be on the field as long as they had been on the field and run a productive defense, or say that you're running a physical defense, but you don't have the players to do it. Like, so, they are investing in that, in the front seven. And so, and you could see moments where things were working last year, but you just didn't have the offense. You didn't have the quarterback. And now, we have seen different varieties of developing quarterbacks, where we spent 5 years watching David Carr. That was less than ideal. And then we saw Deshaun Watson perform right away, but then get injured. And so quarterback development, if it was easy, then everybody would have a quarterback, and most of the teams don't. So but this is interesting to see how they're going to be able to do it. Like, they have a lot of new coaches and new positions, but new doesn't mean bad. New, if you come from a scheme where everybody's working on the same page, this could be interesting. It could be amazing. I'm really looking forward to seeing what they can do. And what's exciting about that is they already have some things in place. Like, the special teams has been kind of holding down the fort the last couple of years. And it's nice, if, kind of symbolically, your second, your third pick, offense, defense. So often over the course of the Texans' history, either the offense has been good or the defense has been good. But if you look just number-wise over the legal drinking age Texans, there were very few times where this was a balanced team, where the offense and the defense could both win you games. Usually one was pulling the other, and I would hope that they get to the point where it's a more balanced team and a more entertaining team. Because if you look at this schedule is gettable. The AFC South is gettable. And then once you get into the playoffs, anything is possible. But they need to take a next step where they are a relevant team. And I think that they have some pieces in place that could be a relevant team, and that's exciting.
What's up next for you, Steph? Just rookie MiniCamp. You working on anything for the Chronicle, or?
Not particularly. I mean, I do think at some point I'm going to put together just some things where I know that fans have questions about things, or like, why is this and why is that? And I think a lot of that why stuff will get clarified the more time elapses. That, when in the last piece I wrote, one of the things I was talking about is that people can't be their best in times of crisis or chaos, where there isn't like a leadership direction, that people are trying to deal with things instead of just being their best. And one of the main messages that Demiko Ryan has given to the players, and pretty much everybody, is like, well, what is your expectations for Will Anderson? It's like, it's going to be good enough if he just does his best. And so I think that is kind of the direction where people can focus more on the football and less on, some of the distractions. And I'm looking forward to that. But there's a lot of people, like when things are kind of up in the air, people hear gossip or grab onto gossip and want to hold on to it, even though it may not have anything to do with reality. And you saw that kind of in the draft. Like, there was an absence of information, and some people took that absence of information in a negative way, when they should have just known that uncertainty isn't good or bad. It just is uncertain. And so when things are kind of in a more aligned leadership direction, and a more conventional football direction, a more normal football direction, it's easier for people to just kind of like, hey, we just need time to see how this works out. Let's just see what the news is, as opposed to kind of like manufacturing, kind of fan fiction of what's really going on at NRG. Sometimes it's like what they're saying is just like what's happening.
Can't agree with you more. Great stuff, Steph. At Steph Stradley on Twitter, cron.com. Always fun to catch up with you. Thanks for doing this, Steph. Thanks for taking some time.
Oh, anytime. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks, Steph.
Take care. Great stuff from Steph, Sean. But hey, let's switch to the Astros and get into that mode for a few minutes. Not the best weekend for the Astros, Sean. I don't know if you noticed they dropped 2 out of 3 from the Mariners, although JP Francis' debut was nice. 5 scoreless for the 28-year-old newbie. What did you think?
Thought he was awesome. I'm not surprised. I mean, the guy's got some pretty wild stuff, man. It was good to see him locate the fastball. He was really sharp on the breaking ball. I liked his composure on the mound. He saw results, which is huge for, a guy like that getting his first opportunity with the big club. Though I want to see him, once the scout film's out there on him now, come back and make that second start. But it was good. I wish they could have gotten him the dub that night. The bullpen, which, went through a really good stretch there, had been pretty good, but it's been a little touch and go with guys like Montero, especially.
Well, Montero, I want to defend him because that was the craziest inning. He gave up a walk, yes, but he gave up 2 infield singles. One of them was off of his glove, and then they couldn't get it. There was another weird seeing eye infield single. The double that cleared the bases was just out of Kyle Tucker's reach. I thought maybe Tucker should have tried to dive the ball, keep it in front of him. I don't know if that keeps that third run from getting off the board. I don't know if that does anything. Of course, then the floodgates opened after Montero came out. Some other guys, but Montero haven't been thrilled with his contract, or I knew he wasn't going to pitch like he did last year, maybe to the extent that we saw of him just smoking everybody most of last year. But I just didn't think it was his fault as much this time around.
No, maybe not this time around. And I'm with you on wanting to defend him a little bit because he's obviously been getting crushed. And I went back today actually and looked at his game logs. And look, there was only 4 instances before this previous outing in which he'd allowed an earned run to score. But then I look at the hits. And I need to do a little bit of a deeper dive on this. I want to see what, the hard hit percentage is on a lot of these, because obviously you mentioned, there were some fluky ones the other night, but it's just, he's not producing. He's not seeing the results. I'll put it that way, that he saw, much of the time last year for us. And, he's a guy that we talked about, when Neris got his deal, Montero got his deal, it was like, well, okay, who do you feel better about? I felt better about Neris because, he'd looked that way before. It wasn't like an anomalous kind of feeling year for him last season with the Astros. Sure, he did a lot of things that he wasn't used to, but Montero kind of burst onto the scene at the age of 31. Now he's 32 years old. You give him all this money. He was a guy I was a little concerned about maybe taking a step back. I hope he can kind of correct some things, but maybe it looks a little bit worse, when box scores and game logs, when you look at it. And case in point, the little fluky hit the other night and without the walk, maybe things look a little bit differently. Hopefully just, like for him, the rest of the team starts, trending in a little bit more of a positive direction. But it's not just any one guy, man. Unfortunately for the Astros right now, sitting at 500 and 3.5 games back in the AL West right now. I mean, you're looking at a handful of guys in the bullpen, on the starting staff, and in your lineup every day that just flat out need to produce. They need to be themselves. Bregman's got to get back to being Bregman. Jordan's got to kind of snap out of it. Tucker's got to, and maybe he is. I mean, we talked about it last time. I said the guy hadn't had an extra base hit in like God knows how long, and then dude rips a double like the same night.
Yeah, the issue isn't Tucker or Jordan. Those guys have done a ton this year, and yeah, they're hey, you know what? They're allowed to slump. Bregman can't. I mean, I know you struggle in April every year, Alex Bregman, but this was the year we needed you not to struggle because Jose Altuve wasn't there to bail you out. Michael Brantley's not there to bail you out. There's not guys in this lineup that have the age and all of that sort of stuff. And Mauricio Dubon, we're starting to see him come down to earth. We knew that was going to happen. Corey Julks has come down to earth. I mentioned a couple of weeks ago, maybe it was last week. I said, Corey Julks, he hasn't walked. And I thought, well, that's going to come. He's got a history of walking in the mind. He's still not walking. Corey Julks, when you're struggling, don't try to hit every pitch. You're allowed to take some walks every now and then. You're allowed to take some pitches. And they just have issues with a couple of their guys in the order that, they got to walk a little bit more. Mauricio Dubon's got it. Some of the younger guys, there's got to be a little bit more patience. And, I want to see the hitting coaches instill that in these guys. Like, hey, wait for your pitch, quit swinging at everything.
And that's what's gotten Alex Bregman out of, his slumps, in years past, is just being a little bit more patient at the plate, walking a little bit more, and really just kind of retraining that eye to see the ball out of the pitcher's hand. Um, follow me if you will, but this is kind of just to kind of highlight what really goes on between the pitcher and hitter battle. I read an interesting article earlier today, which was highlighting Brent Strom and the job that he's done in Arizona. It was on SI. I don't know if you caught it, but it was
Nope.
pretty entertaining to read this. And it was talking about, the things that this 73-year-old guy who you would not associate with all of this analytical and advanced data is using to perfection. And he's also able to apply just his 50 plus years of baseball knowledge and quickly see, like, if it's an arm slot or if it's a grip or if it's placement by the foot of the pitcher on the mound and how they want to attack the hitter and how much he studies hitters. All of these things are going on throughout baseball. And where did he kind of hone that craft in, over his 9 years as a major league pitching coach? Well, it was during 8 of them here with the Houston Astros. And their pitching coach now is sort of a descendant of Brent Strom in that way of thinking and his ability to kind of analyze and look at some data. So I think, the value that a pitching coach brings is obviously to the pitchers, but I think they can obviously bring the value to the hitters as well. And that was all birthed here and perfected here with the Houston Astros. They have the wherewithal to do it. They have the guys that, have proven out year after year after year that they can and they will produce. It's just a matter of time. And so as much as, we're talking about, well, hey, XYZ guy needs to improve this, that, and the other thing, I think that that's coming. It's just not always like clockwork. Sometimes April bleeds into early to mid-May. With these guys that start slow, it's where you start to get really concerned is a guy like Abreu. And I know we're beating him like a dead horse, but it's just that example that I'm going to continue to use until he proves otherwise, where maybe sometimes it's not about a slow start. Maybe sometimes it's, this guy's lost a little bit of a step, or maybe sometimes this guy just isn't seeing something and he doesn't know why. It's never happened to him before. Things you got to work through. So I'm going to be patient still. Again, it's all about positioning, not necessarily about performance, because, again, you can have that sort of patience when your players have, are proven. We know what they're capable of.
Here's the thing, though, Sean. Dusty is like super patient with some of these guys, but just because a guy is proven doesn't mean you have to keep batting him fourth when he hasn't hit the ball for 5 straight weeks. It doesn't mean just because Martin Maldonado is this supposed genius with the pitching staff, if you're not winning games and the pitching staff isn't, they're not the only ones, or they're not, like the answer either right now. They're not exactly rolling. So like, it might be time to, you do have options for Maldonado, John or Diaz, play him a little bit more, especially early in the season, because if you love Maldonado as much as you do, Dusty, you're talking about a guy that's getting older, and Dusty needs to realize Father Time is undefeated. He is a mid-30s catcher. If you love Maldi and you think you're getting to the postseason and you consider yourself the great manager that you do, then it is okay to bench Maldi a little bit early in the season, have those legs fresh for later on, especially when he's not hitting at all and you're struggling as a team and you need some offense, and John or Diaz can provide that offense.
Yeah. It's an understandable criticism. And I always try to just kind of look at it from maybe his viewpoint. And I'm talking about Dusty, in relation to why he continues to bat Abreu where he does, why he continues to play Maldonado as much as he does. And maybe it's, he's looking at this situation like, man, I'm down 2 starting pitchers and really 3 because McCullers ain't back yet. I need a guy to really reel this staff in, and we've got to get the very best and as much as we can out of the healthy guys that we do have on the mound. And the best guy to do that and calling a game, the value that he places on it, is a Maldonado. And I'm also maybe thinking too that look, it's not like I believe he's waiting for Maldi to all of a sudden, have a month of hitting 300, and he's going to up that batting average for the first time in the last 4 seasons to 250. I'm not saying that, but maybe he's looking at the positioning a little bit and being a little bit more loose and patient with these guys to figure some things out, because they're not in a Yankees situation or a Red Sox situation where they're looking way up at the Tampa Bay Rays. Now they're 3.5 games back and they're playing okay baseball, but they're underperforming in large part. So I think it's a little bit of maybe that. And then, just that old school manager of these guys will figure it out. We'd seen it before, and it sometimes it's cost them, sometimes it hasn't. It's worked out where maybe you think about moving Bregman down, maybe you think about moving Pena up again, whatever the case is. We've seen it all over the course of the last couple of years, especially. Dusty's going to Dusty, and
my problem with Dusty is, things have gotten turned around eventually, but is it going to kill you to move Jose Abreu back an occasional game? If you think he's going to get hot eventually, wait till he gets hot, then move him back up. That's legal to do. That is legal to do in baseball. You can't move a guy down in the order and then bring him back up the next day or 2 days later. It doesn't, it's not going to kill you.
Yeah, but maybe he just who knows what's really the issue with Abreu.
Well,
what I mean? If you're Dusty, you're thinking like, okay, well, here's the issue. Is moving him down really going to help our situation here? Like, the guy's busting his tail every day.
Yes, it will, because he's the guy. I keep saying this because I feel like it is getting lost in the shuffle. It's not just that he's batting fourth. Your best hitter is Yordan Alvarez. He bats third. You're telling me, Sean, that Yordan Alvarez is slumping right now? Maybe because nobody wants to give him a good pitch to hit. Why would you give him a good pitch to hit right now? Why would you do it?
Fair.
Jose Abreu's behind him.
No, that's 100% a fair point, and maybe the only point that needs to be made. Look, we talked about this. If you've ever got the opportunity to kind of play with some things and maybe do something a little uncharacteristic out of your comfort zone, Dusty, maybe now is the time. For the same point that I just made, that you're so willing to be as patient with these guys to figure some things out. You're only 3.5 back. Hey, you're only 3.5 back. Let's tinker with some things and see if that works. Maybe that gets guys going. I'm 100% on board with that.
One last thing, this weekend baseball lost an MVP, Cy Young Award winner, 6-time All-Star, and the second hardest throwing pitcher of his era, Vida Blue. And Sean, you think, well, what's the Houston connection to all this? Well, I'm going to give you a Houston connection. I think it's going to be pretty interesting to you guys. The only pitcher, by the way, who threw harder in the 70s was Nolan Ryan, and Blue also helped current Astros front office advisor Reggie Jackson to 3 Oakland A's championships. But Sean, what you and our listeners, what you guys may not know is that Vida Blue was nearly a quarterback for the Houston Cougars. Listen to this story from our archives when I asked author and historian Robert Jacobus to tell the story he told us, he told in his book, Houston Cougars in the 1960s, Death Threats, the Veer Offense, and the Game of the Century. Here's what Jacobus said when I asked him about that Vida Blue story. He tried to recruit a guy who would have become the first black quarterback in the South. He also was a pretty darn good high school pitcher in baseball. Robert, who was that guy? What happened when they took him to the Astrodome? Because I think that's a good part of the story. And why didn't Yeoman get him?
Well, the gentleman you're talking about is Vida Blue, who eventually in 1971 became the Cy Young and most valuable player for the Oakland A's. And I believe he won 24 games that year. And, and he became won over 200 games in the majors. Most people around our age remember Vida Blue. He was from northern Louisiana. I believe he's from Minden, Louisiana. Turns out he was a heck of a high school quarterback also. Well, when I interviewed Vida, he said football is probably his better sport. I believe he accounted for about 5,000 yards of offense in about 10 or 11 games his senior year. He came down to U of H, a recruiting trip. Vida told me it was the first time he'd ever been on an airplane. They took him over to the Astrodome because back then, I think it was 1966 or 67, the Astrodome was a big recruiting tool because dome stadiums were a brand new concept. Vida, when he went to the dome, from what I understand, he stood out on the mound, pitcher's mound, and he looked out, beyond the center field fence, and he made the comment something like, maybe someday I'll be playing here. And he really was all set to come to U of H and be their first black quarterback in the South, run the Veer offense with people like Warren McVay and Paul Gibson. You can picture a backfield like those three guys. But then not long before that, his father passed away. There was an offer on the table from the Oakland Athletics. I believe it was a $5,000 bonus. And Vida's family needed the money. And so he decided to go the baseball route. And in the end, it turned out well for him. Vida told me, he ended up with his health and 2 good knees and things like that. But he told me he always kind of wondered. He would have liked to have given football a shot, maybe. But in the end, it worked out pretty well for him.
Yeah, Shaun, sure did work out pretty well for him, I would say.
There's so many of those stories, with the greatest athletes, in their respective sports. Why? Because they were athletes. They were very good at everything, and it's funny. Looking back at like his career, 209 game winner, ERA title 1 year in 71. And that 1 year in 71, I'm just looking, dude won 24 ball games, ERA title, was an all-star, won the Cy Young, won the MVP, and they lost the AL Championship Series to go figure, the Baltimore Orioles. I could guarantee you this, the Orioles did not win the World Series that year in 1971. I don't know who did, probably the Cardinals or something, but it's just funny looking at these guys' careers. And, I've been seeing a lot of stuff today since his passing that, man, why isn't Vida in the Hall of Fame? Why isn't he in the Hall of Fame? And he's got some really terrific numbers, but they're not Hall of Fame numbers. You go back, he's one of those guys like a Bert Blyleven, you go back and you look at these guys, or even a Tommy John, and you look at their numbers and you're like, yeah, they're pretty good. They look a heck of a lot better now today than maybe they did back then when everybody was pitching 250 plus innings every season. And, the complete games, the shutouts, all these things were up, but he was a darn good pitcher, maybe not a Hall of Famer, but, from everything that I've read and heard over the course of the last, not just 24 or 48 hours about the guy, but obviously he was household name because of the uniqueness of his name for over the years. He was a hell of a baseball guy, man. And, look, he went through his adversities during his life like a lot of other people do, but what a life he led. It's incredible to go back and look at it.
You mentioned Bert Blyleven. No, Blyleven eventually got into the Hall of Fame, and maybe it's not
maybe
over.
Tommy John will too.
Yeah, it might not be over for Vida Blue. And the interesting thing is that he passed away right after Oakland found out that the A's are moving to Las Vegas, and it feels like that whole sort of era is sort of dying on Oakland. The championship back in the late 80s with Oakland's going to be a little bit marred with the steroids with Canseco and McGuire. So really the golden era for Oakland A's baseball, they were the Kansas City A's, they were the Philadelphia A's, but the Oakland A golden era was those early 70 teams with Reggie and Vida and Sal Bando and, all those great players from that whole generation.
I'm sure somebody's done it and somebody will do it whenever it does become official, because it is inevitable whenever Oakland is no longer Oakland and they're Las Vegas or whatever. But those teams, those great teams and all of the great players, amongst, and I'm just talking specifically baseball, amongst all of the organizations and one with history, just talking about it, they used to be the Philadelphia Athletics, that goes back 100 years. Maybe the most underappreciated and one of the, organizations that's still around today that they don't give the amount of respect that is so due to the historical elements of the franchise because of everything you just said. I mean, you're talking about the era of Reggie Jackson winning championships and just so many great players, man. They've become an embarrassment. They become the butt of jokes. They've become just a punchline, and that sucks. I mean, there's a entertaining and enjoyous part about it because they're in the Astros division. But, from a baseball fan standpoint and a historical element, it is sad to see. It's sad to listen to. And, hopefully wherever they go, if they wind up in Las Vegas, then they can.
Oh, that's a done deal. They're going to Vegas in
done.
2027. Yeah.
Hopefully they can, Vegas, pays homage to their history. And it's such a difficult thing to do. When you're in a new city and a commuter city like, Las Vegas is. But they definitely deserve better than what they've gotten in Oakland via their ownership. And unfortunately, I don't think that part of it's going to change. It's just going to be a new city and a new venue and everything's new and they ride high off of that. But, we'll see.
Yeah. And I got to say it again before we close out. This is Bill James talking, but for the people back then, Vida Blue, second hardest throwing guy in the 70s behind Nolan. If you're second to Nolan Ryan, that is no shame. Yeah. And, we're talking about 3 World Series. We're talking about a Cy Young Award winner, 209 wins. And, it used to be 300 was the bar. I think 200 might be the bar from, the last 20 years or so. And so you might have to relook at what that was. And maybe he should be judged on those other guys. Maybe he should be judged on the current win totals for starting pitchers. But yeah, just incredible. And, the Oakland A's, everybody thinks of like, oh, it's terrible because of the last few years, the last decade or whatever, because nobody comes to the ballpark, especially in the last, 3 or 4 years. They haven't been very good. But let's not forget, the Oakland A's started or were a key component for Moneyball. That's where the Astros picked that stuff up and took it to a whole other level. They were a key component for that early 70s. They brought that early 70s dynasty. And, we had lost the dynasties there for a little bit with the Yankees ended in the mid 60s, but then they had that early 70s dynasty. Then you went to the Big Red Machine. So, they brought the dynasty a little bit back. I mean, think about it, Shaun. We talk about it with the Astros trying to win back-to-back. It's been a long time since the team went back-to-back. What those teams did back then might have been a little bit easier because there were less teams, but still, it's hard. Like we just see it with the Astros. You come off playing into October, November, injuries because of the pitchers are pitching another month of the season to try to win that champion. That what you're putting on an arm and guys just a little bit more tired coming into training camp, coming into the regular season the next year. So it's a big deal, trying to win these back-to-back. What they did was, we can't forget that this is hard. A little bit easier back then, but still it's hard to do.
No, there ain't no question about it. I mean, what's it been? 22 years since it was last done by the New York Yankees. And it'll be done again. It'll happen. Teams are too good. Roster construction, what these GMs and these owners are able to do. And in baseball, look at the Mets, look at the Dodgers. The Astros are kind of in the conversation now with the Yankees, of course, not looking necessarily at that luxury tax. It's a salary cap free sport with a roster construction and an owner that's willing to say, let's go get it done, whatever it takes to do it. Oakland A's have been the farthest away from that sort of mentality for as long as I can remember. But again, it will happen. If it's the Astros, I would love to see it. If it's Yankees, Red Sox, Dodgers, somebody's going to do it again. And my guess it would be at some point inside the next decade. And that's probably, not a hot take, maybe stating the obvious, but it'll happen again. But because it's happened and it's been so long since it happened, yeah, all due respect to the A's. I mean, you look at the dominant organizations in baseball history from the Yankees, to the Cardinals, to the Dodgers, to the A's, to the Reds. I mean, you go up and down the line, decade upon decade upon decade. There's always been one. 2000 teens, 2020s, it's the Astros decade, baby. And we'll see how they finish the 2020s out. Hopefully it's with a couple of more.
If the Astros are going to get a back-to-back, they need to start getting their tushy in gear. And hopefully we're going to talk, because we're recording this before Chas McCormick comes back. And then, of course, Brantley should be back in the next day or two. So by that time, maybe by this time, when we record our show on Thursday night. Hopefully, we're going to be talking about
what do people say, Robert? What do people say every year? It's baseball. Let's not act brand new. Let's check the standings. Come Memorial Day. What's supposed to happen around Memorial Day? I think you're getting a guy named Jose Altuve back around that time.
Maybe sooner. Maybe sooner. You're
going to be, if everything stays status quo, and unfortunately, knock on wood, it doesn't feel like this is the kind of season where it's going to be that way, but you're going to get Brantley and Chaz back and Altuve back, and you might be at full strength, at least as full strength as you can be now with no Garcia. Maybe McCullers is right around the corner too. It's going to be interesting. Then we can really start talking some ball right around Memorial Day.
Yeah, I'm more worried about the pitching, to be honest with you. But hey, we'll see you on Thursday. Have a good one, man.
All right, enjoyed it.
You're listening to Houston Sports Talk.
Hey, don't forget to support us by subscribing and commenting on YouTube. You can always listen to us on Spotify, Apple, or your favorite podcast app. Tell your friends about us and share our show links on social media. Spread the word, everybody. Thanks for listening.